welcome to Talent Hub Talk. I am Ben Duncan, and this is a place where prominent and inspirational figures from both the local ANZ and global Salesforce Ohana share their stories. In today's episode, I am delighted to be joined by Cedric Savarese, the founder and CEO of FormAssembly. Having had FormAssembly as a Talent Hub Talks podcast sponsor, it was awesome to sit down and hear more about the origin and evolution of the business. Cedric shares where the idea came from, how they identified Salesforce as a partner, and how that relationship has evolved over the years. Cedric also provides some insight into the current challenges that businesses are facing with data and what the differences are between data ownership and data stewardship. Finally, Cedric talks us through how he has approached retaining and attracting talent, as well as what excites him most about what is still to come from FormAssembly. I hope you enjoy the episode. Cedric, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's absolutely our pleasure. And obviously FormAssembly have been a sponsor of our podcast over the last couple of years. So it's really great to have you come on, spare your time and talk to me more about the business and the journey that you've been on. So what I'd really like to do to start off with is delve into the beginning of the story and I guess where the idea of FormAssembly came from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from France, as you can probably tell with my accent. But back in France, I worked at a startup that was doing a lot of consumer surveys. My background is in IT and engineering, and we were doing a lot of consumer surveys. We were collecting data about consuming habits, and we had to crank out a lot of surveys. And I got into this process of trying to build those surveys quickly and automating this process. And then I moved to the States. I worked at a university for some time and in their IT and web team. And as part of my work there, I helped them also rebuild a student application for the school. So, I got a lot of exposure to that. As a developer, building forms is not really the fun stuff to do, but it's vital to business user. It's something that is very important, collecting data to just be able to do the job you're supposed to do, right? So that's how I got the idea. I started building something, and then it took off from there.
So was it just you? Is it the typical startup story of someone in their spare bedroom initially building a product?
Yeah, I don't think we even had a spare bedroom at the time, so it was in the bedroom taking client calls. I built a product by myself in the beginning. It's a bootstrap story, so. In the first few years, it was just building a product and selling it, and slowly ramping up from there.
So if you look back to those early days, obviously I'm sure there were a huge amount of challenges with any startup and especially a product business like marketing. All of these things kind of come to mind. But for you, what was the biggest challenges you faced in the early days?
Yeah, so it was really just the constraints with the fact that we were bootstrapped, so we could only hire people when the revenue was making that possible, right? For the longest time, we didn't have a marketing department, or we didn't really have salespeople or anything like that. It was just a handful of engineers, and I think the first really helpful hire that I did was this customer support person, right? To take that load off of what I was doing at the time. At the time, I was doing everything. I was doing support, doing sales, development, and even payroll, even running payroll. So
the good old days.
Well, no, I'm glad we're past that. People, I don't know how repeat entrepreneurs do that because going through those early stages is painful. I'm glad to be where we're at now.
100%.
Sure. Yeah.
And did that come naturally to you? Like if you think about because obviously you were coming from that development background, right? So throwing yourself into sales and I guess marketing and HR, like were there areas that you particularly enjoyed or didn't think you would enjoy perhaps that you did find that you enjoyed or maybe struggled more with?
I mean, I've certainly struggled with everything way too much, right? At some point, you need to be able to rely on other people who know that better, right? So the fact that we were bootstrapped, the fact that we had to do a lot more, that I had to do a lot more by myself in the beginning and so on, probably slowed down the growth of the company compared to, more traditionally venture-backed business. I enjoy, like personally, I enjoy learning and kind of stretching myself, getting a little bit outside of my comfort zone and trying to understand all the various aspects of running a business. So, in some ways it helps me, right? Understand how the business is operating and functioning. On the other hand, I probably tried to do too much by myself early on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably something that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into, right? So a lot of the audience, a lot of the people listening to this are coming from a Salesforce background, so they'll be, they'll have heard of the product, they might have used it, they might have installed it for one of their customers or their current employer. But when you built the product, it wasn't. Am I right in saying you weren't building for Salesforce specifically? That integration came further down the line. So when did it become obvious that was the right play and a really good match and product fit?
Yeah, so it came up very early. I think we've been a partner since 2008, right? So it's a long, it's already a long partnership, and it came about because a customer mentioned it to me. Like I didn't know about Salesforce at the time. Hadn't been part of the tools that I was using, and they just mentioned it. They say, "Oh, it would be nice if your product could integrate with Salesforce." And I investigated, and Salesforce really was, and they still do. They made it very easy for other vendors, other products to integrate with them. Right? You could get a developer account for free. You could build an integration. And then you had that exposure through the marketplace, which for me was huge because I didn't have a marketing department or any marketing experience and so on, right? So I was like, oh, that's great. I can be on the marketplace and the product can sell itself, right? I don't need to worry too much about that. So that was very, very, very helpful. So that's how we started. And, at the time you could be on the, in this program for free, or you had to pay a small fee to be part of that partnership. Since then, it has changed quite a bit, right? But early on, it was very easy for us, and that's been fueling our growth ever since, right? Most of our customers are integrated with Salesforce. Most of us find us because of our partnership with Salesforce, and the range of our customers, the fact that we can work from nonprofit to Fortune 500 companies is, very, very thanks to our Salesforce partnership.
Have you ever gone back and spoken to that customer that that mentioned Salesforce originally and said, you know what, that was a great moment in our journey?
It's true. I should. I don't even. We changed our email provider since then, I think. So I'm not sure I could even find that email exchange. It's but yeah, that would be a good one to go back to. For sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
we still have customers from that time period, right? Some of our oldest customers are, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know obviously products need to evolve and continually, right, to keep up with competitors and the demand in the market. You recently, or one of your more recent product releases was workflows. What can you tell? Because in the Salesforce world, we know what a workflow is from a Salesforce perspective, but from FormAssembly, what does a workflow do, and what problem is it solving for customers?
Yeah, I think so. What we do, especially with regard to Salesforce, is that we enable a data collection process, which is typically the beginning of some sort of workflow automation, right? You collect data, you get into Salesforce, and then something else happens, right? And with workflow, what we recognize is that we want this process to be easier for our customers to do within our product, right? So it's not just, oh, I'm collecting data and then I'm going to set up some approval process in Salesforce, for instance. It's like, let's do it all in one place. And then when it's approved, it can still flow into Salesforce, right? So that's the first thing. And then the other aspect is that data collection processes often involve more than one form or one person filling one form, right? If you think of a more sophisticated example is a student application, right? A student application, they may have their the main application, and then they may have supplemental forms depending on eligibility. They may have a housing request or a financial aid request, and that can be routed to different people, right? So those are the more sophisticated use cases that we cover with our workflow.
And you're operating in a space that is complex and ever changing, right? The data world, different countries, different requirements, different legislations. It's complex, and things have probably, not just probably, they have definitely changed over the years since you built the business initially to now, and I'm sure there's changes every day, week, month, year. So how do you keep up with that amount of change and the legislations, and how challenging has that been?
Yeah, for sure. Since we started, there's been a lot more regulations around data privacy that have came about. The GDPR in Europe was one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one. There's been a few more in the US since then. And it's definitely become a major concern for pretty much every customer that we talk to, whether they're in the US or elsewhere. So people see data as obviously an asset, right? You need to collect data to power your business, right? But it's also a liability. There's a risk associated to collecting data. You're at risk from a privacy breach, a data breach, and being sued for it, or having some sort of a business impact that you need to worry about, right? So, and I think people are more and more conscious about this liability aspect, right? You hear those horror stories about data breach and identity theft and scams and fraud and all the stuff that can happen when data is mishandled. So not only you can become a target of fraudsters, but then you can be fined by government entities, and then you can use your customers, or you can be sued by your customers, right? So there's definitely a lot of things that people are worried about, and that's why we, as a company, we chose to invest a lot in security and compliance, right? We make it a big part of how we operate as a business and the value that we provide to our customers, right? Whether it's collecting certifications that are audited by third parties, whether it's the internal training and all the features that we put into the product, we really try to do our best to provide some level of comfort to our customers on how their data is handled while it's in our care, and also what else we can do to help them with meeting not only their obligations with regard to the law, but also meet the expectation of their customers, right? Because now, when you share data online, you have different expectations, right? It used to be that people just could do just whatever they wanted with your data, right? They could resell it, they could, and that's no longer the case, or at least not as easy as it used to be.
Yeah, it's a fascinating space, and I think it's ever evolving, right? So you can never kind of rest on anything in this space. And we've seen recently in Australia some large data issues with some of the biggest companies in Australia, and but it's not just a problem for big companies, right? And I think that's something that me as a small business, I maybe don't give it as much attention as I should, because I think, well, I'm a small business, how's my data gonna? But it really is important, right? It's important to everyone. And I know there's on your website you talk about the difference between data ownership and data stewardship. So for listeners, can you kind of explain the differences and where that kind of stands?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, we collect data on behalf of our customers. That data. So first of all, it's not our data, right? It's our customer data, but they themselves get that data from a person, right? So if you fill out a form and share your information, first and foremost, this is your personal information. That's your data, right? If you think about it, the business that owns it or that collects it, um, they we don't think that they own it in the sense that they can do whatever they want with it, right? They cannot just resell your personal information like that without meeting some requirements. So in some cases, it's legally enforced, right, with the GDPR in Europe or the CCPA in California, and Australia has their own data privacy laws where that puts an onus on the business to follow some rules, like at the very least, like disclosing why they are asking you to share your information, what they're planning to do with that information, right, and getting your permission, your consent on whatever it is that they're going to do, right. So this idea of data stewardship is to say, you no longer collect data and then own it to use as you see fit. You have a responsibility with the data, right? It's not your data; it's your customers' data, it's your employees' data, whoever that is. You have a responsibility to it. You have to take care of it, and you have to be a good steward of that data while it's in your care. And so there's a lot that goes into it, whether it's making sure that you minimize the amount of data that you're collecting, right, to only what you need, and you only keep it for as long as you need. Making sure that you secure it, you store it in a way that's safe and secure. Making sure that you get consent from people to use that information, and so on, right? But that's the main difference between data stewardship and data ownership.
So how does a product like FormAssembly help a customer be a good steward of data?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we do in the product or as an organization to help our customers and to help ourselves be good steward of data. So part of it is through education, right? Providing webinars and white papers on how they should be collecting information, what sort of disclosure they need to make, what sort of how to get proper consent from people. Part of it is the product itself, how it can help secure information while it's being collected, while it transits and eventually flows into your information system, be it Salesforce or something else. There's features in product that can help with the privacy of the information. For instance, if you collect sensitive information like a social national ID number or social security number, right? You can mask that information. You can make sure that it's not doesn't transit over email. For instance, it's redacted when it's sent through email, or it's not visible on screen if you're in a public space, for instance, right? So there's things like that help protect the privacy of the data that is built into the product. And then the idea is that when you have a platform like FormAssembly to collect data for your organization, it improves the oversight for your own internal IT or security team or legal team, compliance teams, right? It improves oversight because they can see who's collecting data in the organization, and you can make sure that they're doing it in a way that complies with your internal policies and obviously the law, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because anyone can put a form on their website, right? Like I could get a developer to build a form on my website, but I wouldn't think of all of those things.
Right.
And I could be capturing data and doing like a web to lead within Salesforce, but I have no prior knowledge of all of the data landscape and the requirements that are on me and the risk factors and using a product and platform that you guys provide kind of takes care of all those issues for me as long as I'm working with the product and collaborating with the teams internally at FormAssembly to get the right advice.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a big challenge for the CIOs, the CTOs in large organizations is that it's very hard to keep track of who's doing what, right? Because anybody can sign up and use SurveyMonkey or some other products out there to start collecting data, and it's getting harder and harder to do it properly and to do it right. Right. The simple fact is that if you have an opt-in, like your typical newsletter, right, where you get a name and email address and you ask someone to check a box to say, yes, I want to receive your newsletter, right? The simple fact that your checkbox should not be checked by default, for instance, is not something that people necessarily know about. But if you get it wrong, you might get in trouble with regulators in Europe because that's against the GDPR regulation, right? So it's getting harder and harder to do it right. And for people whose primary responsibilities are to protect the assets of the organization, like the data. It's a tough thing to do when you don't see what people are doing and when they're kind of going on their own.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now about like when I've bought products and, you get to the end of the buy section and it's like a lot of those are ticked, like, oh, do you want to receive our newsletter and special offers and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting that a lot of companies do have that by default.
Right. And if you're a marketer, you want to have it by default because you get more people to check, to basically enroll into it, right? There's a fine line between dark patterns, right? Those patterns are designed to really trick people into doing things that they probably wouldn't want to do if they really thought about it. And so it's tempting to do as a marketer or as a salesperson, but it's getting more. So not only it can get you in trouble with regulators, but it's also what consumer come to expect from trusted vendors and partners and businesses they do business with, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm a recruiter, so I'm interested in this topic as well because you operate in a very competitive market, the tech field. Over the last couple of years, it's been crazy where there's been so much demand and competition for top talent. How have you approached that, and how do you kind of feel that you have I guess come up with ideas to retain staff as well and make sure that the growth is continued because you're not losing staff as quickly as you're growing?
Yeah, so it's definitely challenging. You have to keep up with benefits and pay and compensation packages. There's nowhere around that. You have to make sure you build a culture where people want to be, where they want to work. But it's not necessarily enough, right? People are going to have multiple options, and they're going to move on with their career. And sometimes, if you want to grow your career, the best way to do that sometimes is just to jump ship and go to a new place, right? That's the kind of a nature of thing. But we try to invest in our team, invest in our talents. With professional development, for instance. I think if you look at our support team or customer success team, people who help our customers, who support our customers, they probably know more about Salesforce than most consultants or Salesforce consultants because they kind of live in it day in, day out, and even though it's not our primary responsibility with regard to supporting our product, right? We support our product, but not necessarily Salesforce. Salesforce implementation is not really what we do. But nonetheless, they happen to know a lot, and we actually have quite a few of them going through the Salesforce certification and being certified. So that's something that we do. That's something we celebrate internally when people get through those milestones. So I think that's best we can do is try to provide a place where people want to work and where they can continue to grow and professionally, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you acknowledge sometimes people will leave, and that's right for their career, and that's great. I think we see a lot of times, when people do resign from jobs, they get a lot of pressure put on them to stay because it's
Hmm.
beneficial for the company, but it might not always be the right thing for them. So, as a CEO that acknowledges sometimes, people will leave, that's refreshing to hear. You're a remote first business as well, and I think that's not driven purely by COVID, right? That's something that you've always been kind of passionate about.
Yeah, that's true. Just quickly on the people who leave, I like to think that they graduate from the company to move on to bigger and better things. At least when it's a success story, that's how you should feel, right? Um, it's not always fun to have to go find someone else, but it's a nature, I think, right? If you want what's best for people, and sometimes what's best is not for them to kind of stay and stagnate in their current role. But yeah, we've been a remote organization for many years prior to COVID, which I think really helped us. Obviously, through COVID, we really didn't have to change much in terms of how we operate as a business. Um, and we kind of design our culture around being a remote organization, like the way we work, what we value, our core values are all um, designed around this remote work culture. So it's worked us. It's worked for us. It served us well to really be able to retain and attract talents from all over the world. Right, we're not tied to a specific geography. But it used to be a stronger hiring benefit, right, than now, since COVID. A lot of businesses have moved to remote or fully remote. So I like to think that we still do it better than most, but it's no longer the competitive advantage.
Yeah, I think you still have the advantage that you've been doing it for a long time, so you know how to do it well. Because there are elements of like acknowledgement, training, things like that maybe aren't done so well post COVID because companies have had to adapt and maybe have overlooked some of those things. So yeah, and it's not for everyone, right? But I'm sure we are seeing now. Well, I'm definitely seeing in Australia some companies that are looking for staff to come back into the office. So for you, that's probably an opportunity as well, because when people are now used to having the ability to work from home, and if their company starts to ask them to come back, they're going to look for companies that truly are remote and remote first.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think you could probably tell that the majority of people would rather stay remote, stay working from home, or at least have some flexibility, right? We lost people who just didn't want to stay remote, right? They would rather go back to an office environment, and I get it, right? It's not necessarily for everybody. It does require you to have a bit of a quiet place in your home where you can work. Um, and there's some downside to being remote. Obviously, there's less FaceTime. It's harder to socialize. It's harder to communicate well with people, right? Like you have to be aware of it, and you have to work harder to make it work in that sense. But
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been interesting to hear the journey that you've been on, and obviously keeping up with requirements and legislations and regulations and all those things. But because you've been running the business for a number of years, what still really excites you about what's to come from FormAssembly and the journey that you're still to go on?
yeah, I mean, the company is doing better than ever. We're there's it's stronger and larger than ever. So there's always kind of the next ambitious milestone or project or feature to roll out. But I think what really keeps me excited about the company is just seeing what our customers do with our product. The type of customers we're able to serve and the type of use cases that they have is just fascinating to me. Like through FormAssembly, we facilitate things like signing up for one of the biggest race in the world, like the Boston Marathon, or you can enroll into a school, or you can file a complaint to a city, to one of the largest cities in the world. You can get benefits from nonprofits, right? And a lot of those activities that people do through or sign up for or enroll into are things like can be life changing. Right? That can be very important events in their lifetime. And just the fact that we're there to facilitate that experience is I find that really rewarding. So that's really what keeps me excited about the job.
Yeah, it must be incredible when you know that, when you yourself fill out a form and you know that it's your product that's helping that customer collect that data.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't know, but my son goes to a school that uses our product, and I didn't realize it until we actually got to fill out a form at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, look, thank you so much for both today and also the support with the podcast over the years. It's been an absolute pleasure, and really, really interesting to hear the story, and looking forward to seeing the continued growth and journey that FormAssembly goes on.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ben. That was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the chat, and if you did, please make sure you have subscribed for future episodes that are coming through. I would also be very grateful if you would consider leaving a review on your chosen podcast platform, as 5-star reviews will help us to reach more trailblazers from across the world. I look forward to sharing another episode with you soon, and thanks again.